Hello everyone, and welcome to Politics and Religion. I'm Dave Robbins, sitting in for Irvin Baxter today. If you joined me yesterday on the program, I was taking you through all of the prophetic events on a prophetic timeline from Daniel chapter 2, which was written in about 550 BC, to where we're at right now, on this huge timeline that's written all throughout the Bible. And today I'm going to take you from where we're at on God's prophetic timeline all the way through eternity. We've got a lot of information to cover, so I'm going to go ahead and just dive right off into it. And if you want, if you can see the screen behind me, that's a prophecy timeline of the final 7 years. If you'd like a copy of that, I can send you one electronically. Just email me, drobbins@endtime.com. That's DROBBINS at endtime.com. And I'll also give you a copy of my notes because there's a lot more scriptures and things on my notes than we have time for today in this program. So follow along with me. Let's go through the final 7 years to know what's just ahead, because remember, yesterday I brought you up until today, up to where we are currently on the prophetic timeline. If you haven't watched yesterday's program, to get caught up, go back in our archives and watch it, and then watch this program as well, because it takes you from Daniel 2, where the prophecies of the second coming of Jesus Christ began in the Bible, all the way to Revelation 22 in these two segments. So let's get started. The prophecy, one of the prophecies I wanted to begin with is the sixth trumpet war. And it's found in Revelation 9, 13 through 16. Now, why do I want to bring this up to begin with? Because the sixth trumpet war, I can prove scripturally, that happens before the final 3.5 years of the final 7 years begins. Before the Great Tribulation begins, I can prove scripturally the sixth trumpet war happens on this side of that. However, the Bible doesn't say specifically whether it happens before or after the peace agreement that's going to be signed. So, in my opinion, in our opinion, we believe it's probably going to happen before the peace treaty is signed, because it's hard to believe that you get a peace treaty signed in the Middle East and then there would be this great world war while Israel's rebuilding their third temple and all these different things. So it's our opinion that the sixth trumpet war would happen and then the peace agreement would be signed on the other side of that, because we're going to move right into the world government right after that. So it's our opinion, again, capital O, opinion, that the sixth trumpet war would happen first. But I've got to mention that because it's the sixth trumpet. It's on God's prophetic timeline. So it's found in Revelation 9, 13 through 16, and it says, "And the sixth angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar, which is before God, saying to the sixth angel, which had the trumpet, Loose the four angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. And the four angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour, a day, a month, and a year, for to slay the third part of men. And the number of the army of the horsemen were 200,000, and I heard the number of them." So you say, well, what does that mean? Well, the sixth trumpet war, if you understand what we teach, the first 5 trumpets have already occurred. I'm not going to cover that today. You'll just have to trust me. But just listen to the radio program some more and you'll find out. But the first 5 trumpets have already occurred. This is the sixth trumpet. It's the next prophetic event on God's timeline, the prophetic timeline. And what's going to happen during this war is that it's going to emanate out of the Middle East region. It says, "Loose the four angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates." The great river Euphrates is housed in Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. So the war is going to emanate out of the Middle East region, and it's the next thing to occur on God's prophetic timeline. And when the smoke clears from that war, 1/3 of the entire world's population is going to be destroyed. That's why we call it World War III. Remember, World War I, the first trumpet, 8.2 million killed. World War II, the second trumpet, 52 million killed. Now, many times past that, 1/3 of the world's population in World War III. And that's this sixth trumpet war mentioned in Revelation chapter 9. So the reason I brought that up to begin with, again, is because we don't know if it falls before or after the peace treaty that's going to start this 7-year segment. So you got to remember that, according to our opinion, this is the next thing to happen on God's prophetic timeline. Then we move to the confirmation of the covenant. The confirmation of the covenant one of the main scriptures that talks about it is found in Daniel 9:27. And it says, "And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate." He said, "And even unto the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate." So, what is the covenant? Well, the covenant is the Abrahamic covenant where God promised the land of Israel to the Israelis back in through Abraham's lineage of Isaac. And so, when you talk about the confirmation of the covenant given in Daniel 9:27, it means there's going to be a peace agreement signed in the very near future. They've been trying to sign one for the last 20 years, but it is going to get signed. And what it's going to do, you say, well, how will we know if it is the peace agreement? Because it's going to place the Temple Mount under a sharing arrangement, an internationally supervised sharing arrangement, and it's going to allow Israel to rebuild their third temple. Secondly, it's going to create a two-state solution, which is what the international community sees as the only solution to the Middle East problem right now. And it's going to place the Jews living in the West Bank or in the Old Testament, Judea and Samaria, it's going to leave them under Palestinian jurisdiction or Palestinian rule. And so we'll talk about that a little bit more as we get into this timeline, the ramifications of those Jews being left out in the West Bank. But those are the two main things that we'll see in this peace agreement. And so you say, well, Dave, they've been trying to do that for 20 years and that's stalled right now. You know, there's not really much going on with the peace agreement. Well, actually there is. A lot of times they'll get these agreements agreed to behind closed doors and then they'll just announce what happened. So I've got a couple articles I want to share with you today. And the first one was found in the Jerusalem Post, and it says, Endtime, get ready for the UN Security Council resolution proposed not by the Palestinians, but in the international community. It says, if there is a government in Israel after these elections, now you know before the elections, Netanyahu said, no two-state solution under my rule. Then this article comes out and it says, if there is a government in Israel after these elections that decides to pursue a two-state solution, hey, then there is a way forward. But if there is not an Israeli initiative or support for a two-state solution, Endtime warned, there will be international actions. Now here we get into world government. And it said, pursued not by the Palestinians, but rather by the international community. Whenever you see the term international community, you can replace that with world government. International community is world government. In terms of a Security Council resolution to lay out and preserve the principles of a two-state solution. Now, you say, well, what does this mean? Well, if it means that rather than sitting across the table and negotiating and coming up with a peace agreement, that the international community is going to move in and impose a solution, which the Bible talks about when the Antichrist will confirm a covenant or this world governing body. The second article says Obama is planning a drastic shakeup in the policy toward Israel. This is from Newsmax, and it says the historic victory for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, this is just after the elections, this week in a campaign defined by hardline policies is prompting the Obama administration to consider a major shift in its strategy towards Israel. The White House, because remember, Netanyahu said, no two-state solution on my watch. The White House on Wednesday suggested it could reserve its decade-old policy of using its veto in the United Nations Security Council to protect Israel. Now remember that statement right there. The White House on Wednesday suggested it could reverse its decades-old policy for using its veto in the United Nations to protect Israel. It could refuse to veto resolutions related to the Palestinians or introduce a measure of its own. So up until now, Netanyahu has said, hey, we're going to sit down at the table and we're going to negotiate, and that's the only way we're going to have a peace agreement. The Palestinians are trying to go around that because you don't give them all they want, and as a result, they're saying, well, we'll go straight to the United Nations and we're going to go to the UN Security Council and get them to impose a solution on you. Well, the 5 victor nations of World War II gained veto power over any decision by the UN Security Council. So up until now, the United States has had veto power over any of these decisions. So they know if it come against Israel that the United States would just veto it and shoot it down. But Obama is saying, Mr. Netanyahu, since we see the two-state solution as the only solution, if you're not for that, then just maybe in the future we won't be able, it'll be pretty hard for us to use that veto to protect you, to protect Israel. Now think about that. The United States of America, we've got to protect Israel in the near future. So if you think things aren't happening, things are happening in the peace agreement realm. It's going to happen. The Bible prophesies it. We know it's going to happen. So that event, when that peace agreement's signed, that starts us on this final 7-year timeline, this prophecy timeline. So that's what you're watching for in the near future. The Sixth Trumpet War and the peace agreement to be signed. Once we start off into the 3.5-year period, then the first event that you'll see happen as a result of this peace agreement, Israel's going to rebuild her third temple. It's found in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 4. Now, there are many scriptures that prove a lot of these points. But this is the first one, and let me just say here, because I know I'm coming up to a break, and I'm really going to have to hurry because I got a lot of information. But let me just say, if the Bible, now that I've shown you all these prophecies, how could you look at this and say, well, I don't know that this one's going to happen, or I don't really see that this one's going to happen, when all of these prophecies up till now, I can give you hundreds of them. There's about 1,000 prophecies concerning the second coming of Jesus Christ. And a big majority of those have already come to pass. So when we talk about these prophecies coming in the future, you can bet your bottom dollar that they're going to happen. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. We'll dive off into these final 7 years in the next segment. Don't go away.